You know, when I do this topic, it's really interesting. Some parents won't let their kids come. And other parents say, you can only come if I come with you. I want to hear what that woman is saying. So, all right, do you think we are ready to go? We're ready to go. All right. So I'll have to go very quickly because I've been told I can't take the rest of the day, which you'd really need to talk about sexuality. I mentioned this morning there were human beings, whatever else they are three things. What were those three things? Who was here this morning? You were sleeping? Who is here this morning? Whatever else human beings are, we are sure they are what? Spiritual. Not religious. Spiritual. Relational. That's so. Spiritual, relational, and what's the topic this afternoon? Whatever else human beings are, there's general consensus. We are spiritual, relational, and sexual. And it has nothing to do with whether or not people are exhibiting sexually related behaviors. We are sexual beings. What I find is we'll talk about almost anything except sex. And it's one of the most important things we can talk about. It's as important as spirituality because that's part of who we are innately. The brain is not believed to be religious innately, but it is spiritual, relational, and sexual. All right, a couple things about the brain. Here's that same picture you saw this morning, the two hemispheres. Your brain's about the size of your two fists. You can describe it in lots of different ways. So if you cut this in half, this is basically what you'd see. And you wouldn't need a microscope to see those parts. You'd see the brain stem here that connects to the spinal column. You'd see what's called the cerebellum. And Monday night when we talk about the way the male and the female brains are wired, has a lot to do with the cerebellum. It's an amazing organ. All you need to do is think an abstract thought. I'm talking and looking around and I'm saying to my brain, I want you to back up a few steps. And automatically the cerebellum just moves all my joints and muscles to make that happen. And I don't have to think a thing about it. It's fascinating. So sometimes when people have a stroke, they'll get a stroke in the cerebellum. And they'll know what they want to do. I want to reach and get a glass of water. But what they'll do is hit the glass and knock it over, or go past it, or pick it up and drop it. So it's a critical part of the brain. Then you'd see this middle section in here that's called the limbic brain, the mammalian brain, the emotional brain, the second brain layer, lots of names. Do you see this little curved piece right here? That's the corpus callosum. That's that largest band of connecting fibers that lets the left hemisphere talk to the right hemisphere. And then you'd see all of this rind on the watermelon up here. And that's the only part of the brain that has any conscious awareness. Lots is going on in other parts of the brain. But it's only when it's up here that you can consciously start thinking about it. So that when your heart connects with your brain and sends information up to your brain, if you become aware of that, you do it up here. But before you think that you become aware of very much, studies suggest that you're lucky if you're aware of 15% of what's going on in that part of the brain. Now here's the deal. You can only manage what you can label and describe. So if you can only label and describe 15% of what's going on up here, the other 85% you're not managing. So increasing your awareness is really critical. And one of the ways you do that is about learning more about brain function. The first two layers, brainstem and cerebellum, and this middle layer, are both subconscious. Lots of things are going on there, but we are not consciously aware of those. The hemisphere bridges, just a couple comments about this. When a young person comes up and talks to me, especially a male, if it is a critical question, I'll say, "How old are you?" Because I want to know whether these bridges are close to being done. Because sometimes, you know, young men come up to talk to me. I love the male brain, by the way. It's so interesting. So they'll come up and talk to me, and I'll say, "How old are you?" And I mean, they look all grown up. And one guy came up to me not too long ago and said, I was talking about sexuality in the brain, and he said, "You're wrong." I said, "Well, I may be. In what particular do you think I'm in error?" He said, "You said that my brain isn't going to be done till the late 20s. I said, "That's exactly what I did say. And I'm thinking in your case it might be longer than that." And he says, I said, "So what do you think the problem is?" "Well," he says, "I'm 17. And I go, "Wow, body's done, brain's got a long way to go." He says, "I know exactly who I'm going to marry." I said, "Really? How long have you known that?" "Oh," he says, "about 3 months." I said, "Okay. What were you thinking 6 months ago?" "Oh, I thought I was going to marry somebody else." I said, "Yes, in 6 months from now, you'll probably think something entirely different." "Oh, I will not. My brain is done. I know who I'm going to marry." And I thought, I hope to heaven you don't, because it's not going to be pretty in 10 years. You know, the person that you think you want to wake up next to every morning for the rest of your life when you're 17 can be light years different from the person that you think you want to wake up next to when you're 27. And that's the problem that we see all over the world. People, you know, make choices before their brains are done. Had one woman come to see me. She got married when she was 15, had 3 kids by the time she was 18. And now she was about 28. She said, "I need to talk to you." She said, "I woke up this morning and I looked around the house and I said to myself, what are all these people doing here? Because if I was making the choice now, guess what? None of them would be here. Not even the dog, but they're already there. So now how do you deal with it?" So the brain takes a lot longer than the body to mature, and you have to understand that. These axons, you know, there's a neuron body, there's an axon, and this is the part where all those little neurotransmitters leave and cross Hong Kong Harbor and, you know, get picked up by the ends of another neuron. That think fiber optics. That has to be wrapped with something called myelin before the information goes quickly and smoothly across those pathways. And these axons that connect that corpus callosum bridge, they're not paved until at least age 20 or 21. And until they're paved, that brain is always at risk for shorting out. So what does shorting out look like? It looks like, for a brain that's pretty well myelinated, watching that behavior goes, what were they thinking? Well, they weren't, because their brain's not completely myelinated. And there can be 2 or 3 years difference in maturation rates among individual brains. So that's one reason I'm not an elementary school teacher. I tell you, those people need a medal and a helmet. So let's say they've got 38-year-olds in their room. They don't have 38-year-olds in terms of development. They've got 30 little brains that range anywhere from 6.5 to 9.5 in terms of development. it's really hard to meet all of those needs, so of the brains that are younger and the ones that are a little older. So that's the, the bad news about the corpus callosum, I guess. You can't rush it. You just have to wait. Now here's the really bad news, and that is right up here behind your forehead is what's called the prefrontal cortex. And that part of the brain contains the most sophisticated thinking mechanism in the universe. Only humans have that level of thought processing. But that doesn't really get going until after age 20. And the latest research is this prefrontal cortex may be done by mid to late 20s. So if you look at, you know, a 5 or 6-year-old, see there's hardly any blue there at all. You know, the frontal lobes are developing, but the prefrontal cortex, you know, is still out to lunch. And then you watch it get little by little more blue and more blue and more blue, and so you come down here somewhere after age 20 and you're starting to see that it's getting more developed. So any of you who are under the age of 30, your brain is probably just now getting done. And as I told one young man this morning, if you have a history of taking drugs, smoking pot, you have just slowed down this process. So you could be 40, 50, and your brain is clicking along like an undeveloped teenager's brain. So listen up. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the genome. This is just a review from Biology 101, so we're all on the same page. So the genome is your blueprint, your complete genetic information. You got 23 pairs of chromosomes. It's fascinating to study DNA and the chromosomes. A chromosome is a single piece of coiled deoxyribonucleic acid, and it looks something like this. And a couple of guys got the Nobel Prize for figuring out that double helix. You get all of your chromosomal DNA from both parents, whoever they were. You could have had an egg and a sperm in a test tube. You still got all of your chromosomal DNA from both parents, but only 99% of your DNA is in your chromosomes. 1% is something in what's called the maternal mitochondria. Do any of you know the term mitochondria? All right, a couple of you do. The mitochondria is the name for the little energy factories in your cells. And in 1% of your DNA is in those little factories. Now here's the interesting thing we're learning about mitochondrial DNA. You only get it from your mother, and it's very susceptible to mutation, much more so than your chromosomal DNA. So it mutates, and those mutated cells collect. And it's fascinating. You know, one single mutation on one single gene, that's all it takes for sickle cell anemia. So a lot of the mutations we're seeing in today's world don't come out of your chromosomal DNA. They come out of that mitochondrial DNA that seems very unstable. So there's your 46 chromosomes, in case you've forgotten what they look like from high school. So pairs 1 to 22 are numbered. And then you've got the pair 23, which is either going to be, we thought, 2 X's or an X and a Y. I was talking to some university students the other day, and I showed them this picture and a hunk in the back of the room. I'm not so far over the hill I can't recognize a hunk. This hunk stands up, and he says, "I think you've made a mistake." And I said, "Where?" Well, he says, "Look at that Y chromosome. It looks like it's broken." I said, "No, it's not broken." Well, he says, "It's smaller than the X." I said, "Good, you got eyes." "Yes, it's much smaller than the X." Well, he goes, "How does that figure? I thought bigger was better." And I said, "Well, Bigger's not always better. Certainly not if you're thinking about eating a pizza. And it is a very tiny little chromosome. And I said, if you think that's bad news, look at the sperm. It's the smallest cell in the body. And look at the ovum. He was not amused. Okay, so if everything goes according to schedule, which it doesn't always, but if everything does, the brain templates during pregnancy so that whatever comes out the chute will be primarily a systemizing male brain or primarily an empathizing female brain, and, read my lips, the brain will match the body in which it's housed. Okay, got that? Up and down means yes, unless you're sleeping. So, variations do occur, and with our more sophisticated equipment, we're finding more and more and more variations. So I want to give you just a couple of examples of that. So here's what we call the gender-brain continuum. At one end is the empathizing brain that's more aligned with the female brain in every culture, and the systemizing brain, and it's more aligned with the male brain in every culture. And for a long time, all we had in this little band was 50-50. We knew the brain wasn't like this and it wasn't like that. It was like it was half and half, and that's all we knew about it. So this continuum only includes 95% of the population. 5% of brains on this planet you cannot put on that continuum. So avoid coming up to me afterward and saying, tell me more about the 5% because I think I'm partnered with one. Because we don't know a lot about that 5%. We just know that it doesn't fit on the continuum. So for years and years and years, this is all we knew, XX and XY. And I'll tell you more about this. Now we know that there's way more chromosomal variation than we ever suspected. So you can have an XX chromosomal complement, or you can have just one X. The other ones took a hike somewhere. Or 3 X's. And then you come over to the systemizing brain, and there's even more variations because more has to be done to that brain during pregnancy to convert it from, you know, the default position into a systemizing brain. So you have an XXY, an XXXY, an XXXXY, and last week we got research that there might be 5 X's and a Y. Nobody is ever one or the other completely. You need to understand that. We have identical hormones in the male body and the female body. None of you guys have anything different from what I have. What's different about the hormones? The level, the amounts, the ratio, good. So that in the male body, testosterone is going to be a lot more prevalent than it is in the female body. 20 times more testosterone. And competition increases testosterone in the male body. So I married a man who had 3 little boys. They were 1, 2, and 3 when we got together. I would never let them date after they played a baseball game or a basketball game. I'd never let them date 1-to-1 because I figured their body's got 40 times as much testosterone. And that kind of clutters up their prefrontal cortex. So now, it doesn't seem to do that to the female body. Females can compete and nothing seems to happen to the testosterone level, which is interesting. So they could bring their girlfriends to the house, but they couldn't go out on a date after they did some competition. So when McGill University does psychological testing to see where you can place people separate from chromosomal testing, the most empathizing brain that we know of might be given a score of 9 empathizing, 1 systemizing. I mean, she can still get dressed, and she can put her underwear on first. I mean, that's a systemizing thing. So even the most empathizing brain can do some systemizing things. And then the most systemizing brain that we can score for might be a 1 empathizing and a 9 systemizing. Even the most systemizing male brain can have some level of empathy. So we're all a little bit of a mix. Now let's look at this intersex business right here. We used to call those individuals hermaphrodites. Do you remember that term? Well, somebody decided that wasn't a good term. I had one guy say to me the other day, I don't think hermaphrodite was so bad. He says, now we're being called disorders of sex development. He says, seems to me hermaphrodite was better than that. So it refers to a group of conditions where there's confusion, and this should not be, I got to reword that. It's confusion between external genitalia and internal reproductive organs. Some people do have their genitalia internally, but that's really not what we're talking about. So there's confusion. They look one way on the outside, and they're different on the inside. And their brains do seem to be 50-50. Now, 2% of live births worldwide are estimated to fall into that intersex part of the continuum. And 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but even when we were talking about 6 billion, that's 120 million people. So I was in the Netherlands talking about this not too long ago. I have so much fun with this information, I'll tell you, I do. So this minister comes up to me, and he said, well, he says, 2%, he says, that could mean that 2% of my congregation is intersex. I said, it could. Well, he says, how am I going to know? I said, you're not going to know. Well, he says, don't you think I should know? I says, it's none of your business. Well, he says, when would it be my business? And I said, well, I suppose if you met somebody and were attracted to them and were thinking about getting married, hopefully they would disclose to you that they were really half and half, and then you might want to go get some chromosomal studies done and see which half was which. If you wanted to have children, if you didn't want to have children, it doesn't matter. So what does that mean? It means the individual has both testicular and ovarian tissue. In the same gonad, sometimes, it's like an ovary and a testicle are together, and it's called an ovotestis, or they might literally have one ovary and one testicle. So this guy says, well, I could ask somebody. And I'm going, oh, great. He says, when I'm shaking hands with people, if somebody new shows up, I could say, brother, do you have 2 testicles? Or he says, I could say to a lady, do you know if you have 2 ovaries or do you have 1 ovary and 1 testicle? I'm going, man, a little knowledge is dangerous for some people. They might look male externally, or they might look female externally. And there's lots of subcategories, and we're not going to go into that, but you just need to understand that we're finding all kinds of variations. And most of the time, it's none of our business. But they do exist, and if you find out they exist, hopefully you treat them just like any other human being, because overridingly, they are human. So how about when your brain doesn't match your body? Do you know the name Bruce Jenner? Well, apparently Bruce's brain has never matched his body. So in this mismatch, in Bruce's case, according to him, he's got clearly a male body. I mean, look what he did in the Olympics. Some of you may not be old enough to remember that, but that was big news. But he says his brain is female and always has been. And it's a very uncomfortable match for somebody when your body doesn't match your brain. Sometimes you'll have a female body, but the person says, I got a male brain, I always have. And another example of that would be Chaz Bono, who has undergone sex surgery to see if they can get a match. I can only imagine how uncomfortable that must be. I mean, my heart goes out to anybody in that category, because I know how life's been hard enough for me, and I match. You know, imagine if you don't match and you continually feel like a man, but you got a female body. Or you continually feel like a female, but you've got this male body. So there's a lot of people out there struggling with interesting things. The transsexual brain, this is kind of interesting. The bed nucleus neurons in the stria terminalis of the brainstem, don't worry about it if you don't want to remember the name, but it's a little teeny piece right here, up there in the brainstem. It's usually twice as large in the male systemizing brain as in the female brain. But postmortem studies of transsexuals, brain-body mismatch, showed that these bed nucleus neurons were the size of what the person believed they were and not the gender they were assigned at birth. Which I find very interesting, because if a person says, I got a female brain and I'm in a male body, and then they do an autopsy on them, sure enough, these bed nucleus neurons are the size they would have been in a female brain. So we got lots of hormonal problems. We have androgenital syndrome, where you've got a female fetus that's an XX chromosome pattern, normal pattern, but she gets exposed to too many androgens, too many masculizing hormones during pregnancy, and so she's born looking like a baby boy. So they raise the kid as a boy. And then come puberty, and they take him to the doctor because nothing's changing, and find out that really it's a female with internal ovaries and just got too much masculizing hormone during pregnancy. Now you've got the opposite. You've got androgen insensitivity, so now you've got a normal chromosomal male, XY, and the mother actually had enough androgen, but for some reason that little fetus wasn't sensitive to those masculizing hormones, and so is born looking like a baby girl. But then puberty hits and she doesn't menstruate. And so now they start looking at what's going on there. Lots of other brain variation differences. I'll just mention a couple. We need to get moving to the romantic love part. The hypothalamus, little teeny brain organ about the size of a cherry, and it's pretty powerful. It's larger in the systemizing male brains than in empathizing female brains or in the brains of homosexuals or transsexual brains. So we're finding some actual genetic, functional, anatomical differences in the brain. The anterior commissure, that's another one of those 3 or 4 bridges that connect the 2 hemispheres. It's 10 to 12% larger in the female brain than in the male brain, and in the brains of homosexual males. Homosexual males tend to have fewer neurons in the 3rd interstitial nuclei of the anterior hypothalamus as compared to the straight male brain, but they've got more than the female brain. So it's a very different brain. And then we've got the little amygdala here, amygdalae, there are 2 of them, and there's quite a bit of difference between straight and gay and lesbian brains in terms of the amygdala. Homosexual males tend to exhibit more female-like patterns in the amygdala, and homosexual females tend to show more male-like patterns. So this is a real burgeoning area of research and fun to follow. All right, let's talk about romantic attraction. However constructed, every brain can be romantically attracted to another brain. It begins in the brain, everything begins in the brain, and when you feel attracted to somebody, there's usually a lot of sexual energy behind that. For some reason, that brain has recognized something it likes in the other brain, and it creates sexual energy. Hormones will be triggered, but which hormones are triggered will depend on some different factors. For example, whether it's just a romantic encounter that you're beginning, or whether it's a committed life partner. Now, when you get this hormonal tsunami, and that's what it is, it floods your brain, and it tends to disconnect the prefrontal cortex. So you've got to wait a while to let that hormonal tsunami calm down so you can actually think rationally again and decide if, just because you're attracted to this person, is this a good relationship to pursue? And one of the things I tell young people is, you gotta look at the family. Because if you marry this person and have a child, you're marrying the family of your partner with all their cellular memory back from 4 generations. And you really need to think about, is this person the kind of person I want for the mother of or the father of my children? Because that's a whole different can of worms than whether you're just one-to-one. So therefore, individuals whose brains aren't done yet are at high risk for getting involved in this hormonal tsunami and moving so quickly that they make a decision before their prefrontal cortex has either developed or kicked in enough to help them make a wise decision. So I tell people, you're looking at least mid-20s, folks. And the problem is, before the brain is developed, it tends to think it's just snazzy. Parents don't know anything. I mean, I got it together. I mean, that's the developing teenage brain. And so you need to slow down. So what happens? When you and a romantic partner say, oh, we've got such good chemistry, you're right. But that's all you've got is chemistry. That's it. And it will give you, you know, that sweaty palms, the butterflies in your stomach, the can't wait to see them, anxiety if you haven't had a text from them in the last 2.5 minutes. It's, you know, whatever. So we talk about the hijacked P-brain. Pretty much researchers are, you know, it's just like ministers. They don't agree on everything. Well, neither do researchers. But one of the things they tend to agree on is that the human brain is the most amazing, complex organ in our entire known universe. It works 24 hours a day, 365 days a year from birth until you fall in love. Then it gets hijacked by phenylethylamine, and the short term for that is PEA. And it is released when you are romantically attracted to somebody or sexually attracted. You know, it's hard, it all gets mixed up together because when you're attracted, you put out sexual energy, and then literally you do become a P-brain. So the chemicals, we're not talking about a committed long-term love relationship here. We're talking about that initial attraction. Somebody said to me the other day, well, how come you get that? You know, that just causes lots of problems. Well, here's my brain's opinion. A lot of people would never partner or marry or have kids without that impetus. Because I'm telling you, the hardest thing you'll ever do in life, although it may be the most rewarding, is live with somebody 24 hours a day and have kids with them, and then raise those kids. There's nothing on this planet that is as challenging as that, in my brain's opinion. So, sexual attraction, falling in romantic love, whatever you want to call it, is fueled by this chemical tsunami involving 3 very powerful neurotransmitters. The first one is PEA, phenylethylamine, and it triggers the secretion of norepinephrine and dopamine. So those are the 3 that are operational in your body when you're in this I'm in love period. So let's talk a little bit about them. PEA is an amphetamine. What's an amphetamine? It's an upper that you can get addicted to, correct? All right, so you can get addicted to PEA, and many people are. And as it's secreted, it triggers the release of norepinephrine and dopamine. Now, here's the good news for those of you who've decided never to partner, or your partner's died and you don't want to do it again. PEA is found in some foods. Dark chocolate and avocado are 2 of them. I tell you, Rena and I eat avocado every morning for breakfast. Not for PEA, but, but we do. And this is, that initial outpouring of PEA is where you get that sense of, oh, I'm in love. Wonder when they're going to call. Can't think about anything else. Oh, I didn't study last night because I was just dreaming about them. If you get addicted to PEA, and many people are, because it gives you that amphetamine-like response, and you haven't taken any amphetamines, as far as you know, they may not make it past the PEA stage, because that initial PEA surge of hormones is so huge and makes you feel so good that as it begins to fall off, because it never can be sustained. You know, the human brain was never designed for addictive behaviors. A hardcore addict is lucky if he or she lives to be 37. I'm aiming for 122. There's a big spread there. So they may not make it past that PEA stage, because as it begins to fall off, it's no longer all this surge of PEA, and it's not as exciting anymore, and it's not all that much fun, and I guess I'll go find somebody else. Because when you find somebody new, guess what? You get a surge of PEA again. And someone who's become addicted to PEA, if they marry, are going to have a real tough time being monogamous. These are the kind of individuals who get married and, you know, intellectually they're sure this is the person they want to be with for the rest of their life, but they don't realize they're addicted to phenylethylamine. And as it begins to fall off, now they have an extramarital affair because they're trying desperately to get back that hormonal tsunami. So as the PEA goes up, so does norepinephrine. Now, norepinephrine is both a hormone and a neurotransmitter. Anything that is both is hugely powerful in the brain and body, because the neurotransmitter part means that it acts on the brain and the central nervous system and every nerve in your body. And the hormone part impacts every other cell in your body. So it's huge. It is a hormonal tsunami. And it, of course, reacts very subconsciously. You're not aware of what's happening in your body. You just can't wait to see that person again. And it regulates sexual arousal, which is the risk when you first meet somebody and pour out a lot of PEA, especially if you have not thought ahead about what your standards are, what you're looking for, setting your boundaries. It's really easy to get sucked into having sexual relationships with them, because that's what norepinephrine does. makes you feel sexually aroused. It also makes you have that pounding heart and the sweaty palms and so on and so forth. Dopamine, that's the third of these substances that is released when you think you're in love. 50% of all the dopamine in your body is not even in your nervous system, it's in your gut, it's in your intestines. So that may explain sometimes when you're really, really attracted to somebody and you're looking forward to seeing them and all of a sudden you get diarrhea. And you wonder, what's going on here? Well, you know, it's the dopamine. You're releasing the dopamine, and half of it's in your GI system. You've got to run to the bathroom. I mean, when you even think about something that you think is going to make you feel better, out pours all this dopamine. Emory University did some interesting rodent studies. You know, we think we're making all of these cerebral decisions and that we have really chosen our mate. Right. They took female voles, a little tiny rodent, and they took some female voles and injected them with some dopamine in the presence of a male vole. Now, they weren't together. There was just a male vole there, and the little female voles saw it, and then they gave all the females a shot of dopamine. And then sometime later, they put them in a group of males, and guess who the female selected every time? The male that they had seen when they got their shot of dopamine. Now, this is what's really critical for both males and females, but especially females. Because if you're in this romantic, I'm in love period, you know, in the pea brain period, and you have sexual relationships with the other person, especially a female will bond to that other person, whether or not it's a good choice, because of all of that dopamine being pumped, which is anathema on our planet today because, I mean, if you look at Hollywood, it ain't a pretty picture. But it's all chemical until you get your brain to make some decisions about it. So the honeymoon period, not marriage honeymoon, the PEA honeymoon period, it's over in about 18 to 48 months, usually 18 if you're seeing each other fairly regularly. A couple of times where it might get extended, and that's if you became sexually active, because now you're pouring out all of these hormones at a higher level, and that's going to keep you attracted. Or if you're apart a lot, that's the danger of internet dating. That's the danger of long-distance romances. You know, you've got all of this PEA, norepinephrine, dopamine, and you only see them once a month. You can hardly wait to see them. And you do that over time, and it can last a little longer. So let's say sometime during this period, 18 to 48 months, they decide that they're going to make the decision and marry, partner with each other. Well, the hormonal tsunami is over, folks. It doesn't get much better after at least 48 months. You know, the first few months of a marriage usually is pretty exciting, but PEA starts falling off. It doesn't seem to last longer than 48 months. And so then they're looking at each other and going, man, I look at you and I don't get any butterflies in my stomach and the palms of my hands don't get wet and you're just a regular person, and where's all the spice? Well, the only way you keep some spice, because the hormonal tsunami is over. You got that? Read my lips. You'll never get it back. The hormonal tsunami is over. It got you partnered. The only way you're going to stay excited about each other is to work on it and have some variety. But you will get 3 different hormones to help you maintain your relationship. Now here's what we found in some studies. Individuals who feel marginalized, they're a little different. They don't fit in. You know, maybe they're in a different country, in a different culture, and don't really speak the language well, and they just feel like they're on the edge of everything. They're likely to be a lot more susceptible to PEA because nothing is feeling really wonderful in their life. Now they get attracted to somebody, pump a little PEA, and they can glom onto that PEA and become addicted to it very, very quickly, which is the benefit of helping people avoid feeling marginalized, you know, to help them feel included. So you move past the PEA to unconditional love, which is what you want in a committed relationship. You know, they may squeeze the toothpaste differently, but you still love them. You know, somebody was in my office the other day. It was just pretty hysterical. You know, she barges into my office and she says, "I've been married for 3 weeks and it's not working." And I said, "Well, that's unfortunate. What isn't working?" "Well, he doesn't do stuff like I do." I said, "Of course not. He's got a male brain first and he's got a different brain second. No two brains are the same on the planet. So what is it that's really, you know, rattling your cage here?" "Well," she said, "he always squeezes the toothpaste through at the middle of the tube." True story. And I said, "So he squeezes the toothpaste from the middle of the tube. How is that a problem?" "Well, you're supposed to do it from the end." I said, "Says who?" "Well, that's how I grew up." I said, "Fine, that's how you grew up. He obviously grew up differently." "Yeah, but," she says, "I went and got him one of those little plastic things that you stick on the end and you're supposed to roll it up, and he still squeezes it in the middle. And I can't do this." I said, "How old are you?" She says, 19. That's what I said. Oh. I said, "All right, here's the solution, for heaven's sake. Go buy another tube of toothpaste. You squeeze it at the end, let him squeeze his in the middle." She goes, "But we don't need 2 tubes. Brain's not done yet. And that was the least of it once she got on a roll. So, unconditional love is a choice, and it really requires maturity. To really do it well, the brain has to have reached some level of maturity. For most people, that's at least mid-20s. Commitment. You make a choice that this is the person you want to wake up next to for the rest of your life. Bonding and constant nurturing. You know, here's the male-female difference. The male brain is a little more goal-oriented than the female brain. It's not that females don't set goals, but they're also concerned about what the journey to the goal is like. Men are sometimes a little bit more goal-oriented. You know, there's stories about Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. He was so goal-oriented. He'd climb up there on the scaffolding, and 3 days later he realized he hadn't peed or eaten or done any of, you know, sleeping. You wouldn't find a female doing that. So the male, if he's interested in somebody and wants to marry that person, he's really got to stay on his toes, because the minute he signs on the dotted line, he's achieved his goal. Okay, so now all the nurturing's over. I got my goal, so now I'm on to something else. And that is not how you do bonding. You need constant nurturing in order to keep that bonding going. So relationships that last longer than 18 to 48 months are assisted by 3 different neurochemicals. I find that fascinating. Totally different chemicals from the, "Oh, I'm in love." So the first one is oxytocin. Oxytocin is put out in large amounts when a woman has a baby, when she delivers a baby. Because mothering is not automatic. You know, some people think, you know, you have a baby and automatically you feel very maternalistic. Not necessarily. Not unless you put out some oxytocin, because oxytocin is what helps you feel bonded to that other person. Sexual activity increases oxytocin, so that's one of the reasons that sexuality in a committed relationship is going to help you with that bonding. The oxytocin crosses the blood-brain barrier, which I find very interesting. But you can't just take an oxytocin pill because it gets destroyed in the GI tract. So it's an action, behavior triggered hormone. It evokes a sense of contentment, makes you feel less anxious, less stressed, promotes feelings of calmness and security when in the company of your mate, and it allows orgasm to occur. So if you're not having an orgasm, maybe something's going on and you're not releasing enough oxytocin. Did I tell you when I was lecturing in the Netherlands I used the term orgasm? We were talking about the 4 core emotions: joy, anger, fear, and sadness. And I said, euphoria is a short burst of extreme, intense joy. Only meant to last for a few seconds. But, you know, when I have 117 candles on my birthday cake, believe me, I'm going to have a moment of euphoria. And one of the people in the audience said, how do you get to euphoria? You know, I found that a very, very sad question. Because if you're healthy and living life to its fullness, I mean, you can get euphoric looking at a green flash in Hawaii. Well, my response was, well, an especially good orgasm will get you to euphoria. It was dead silence. Dead silence. And I said, oh, have they not added that to the church manual yet? They need to, because we need to understand about those brief, extreme, euphoric moments. That's why it's so easy to get addicted to sexual activity, especially if there's not a lot going on in the person's life. They can easily get addicted to pornography, to sexual activity, because they get this burst, you know, of euphoria, and it feels better than anything else that's going on in their life, so they can easily get addicted. Serotonin, it's a neurotransmitter. How much dopamine is in your GI tract? 50%. Good. Well, take a look at serotonin. 90% of it is in your GI tract. And serotonin helps you to avoid depression. It has to do with sleep. It has to do with a lot of things. One way to increase your serotonin is mild to moderate physical exercise. Not extreme exercise, but mild to moderate. And the third thing that happens in a committed relationship is you start pouring out endorphins, which is the brain's natural morphine. It's an opiate, just like something that you would inject. As the brain, as PEA falls off, as it develops tolerance to PEA, norepinephrine, so on, it begins to release endorphins. And endorphins make you feel really good. They're produced during physical exercise, in a committed love relationship, and during sexual activity. And endorphins do all kinds of things. I mean, wonderful things. Calm anxiety, reduce stress, relieve pain, increase attachment, bonding, make you feel comfortable. And so sometimes people say to me, well, how come we don't have this hormonal tsunami our whole lives? Wouldn't that be a good thing? I go, no. No, it wouldn't, because the brain and body is not geared to sustain that level of tension, and that's why it falls off. But you get something in its place that, as the years go by, can change your relationship, and you have such a comfortable, trusting, confident relationship. There's really nothing like it. And the people who get addicted to PEA and never get to that long-term relationship miss the boat in life. So bottom line is, you need to think carefully. I would only let my boys bring their romantic love object home to our house, or do it in a group dating setting to try to minimize, you know, the pressure to become sexually active. I really do believe, as I said earlier, that if we didn't have that tsunami, I mean, that's what gets you started, being interested in somebody. But then you need to give yourself enough time to start thinking cognitively, you know, do I want to be tied to this family for the rest of my life? Do I want this person as the parent of my child? I'll finish with one quick example. 3 boys, my middle son. I would characterize him as a saver, meaning he was always wanting to help the underdog. I don't know where that came from, but he was the only one that got it. So he's 17 years old. He comes home one day and he says, "Mom, I've met a girl." Okay, there was nothing new about that. He was really cute, looked like his father, and his father was very good looking. Looked kind of, you know, Italian, Latin-y kind of, and I happened to like that look, so I thought he was cute. So he was always having a new girlfriend. So he says, "Can I bring her over for dinner?" I says, "Fine, bring her home for dinner." So in comes this girl, and she is cute, really cute. So we had a good time at dinner, and after she left, he says, "Well, how do you like her?" And I said, "Well, I liked her just fine on first meeting, but I don't know her." You know, liking somebody and getting to know them and still liking them is different. Well, he says, "I like her." I said, "Obviously." He says, "There's just only one small problem." I said, "What's the problem?" I thought, is he going to tell me that, you know, she's in the process of a divorce and she's only 17? What is it? He says, "Well, Mom, she was a heroin addict for 5 years. Okay, I'm trying to keep my face really, really straight. I said, "Oh, 5 years heroin addict. Well," he says, "but she's been clean for 3 months, Mom, and I want to help her stay that way." And my brain is going, oh my goodness. I don't want a heroin addict as the mother of my grandchildren. I don't want them passing on to my grandchildren a predetermined urge, you know, to use heroin if they try it. But I got to keep my face straight because he's a saver. So I said, "Well, that's something you might want to think about, but, you know, she seems really nice." Fast forward 6 months, he comes home. He says, "Mom, can I borrow some money?" I go, "It all depends. What for?" "I want to get an engagement ring for her." I said, "You know what? You got to be old enough to earn money for your own engagement ring. Not going to lend you money for an engagement ring." "Oh, Mom, come on." "No, not going to lend you money for an engagement ring." "Well, then I'm going to have to get another job." I said, "Fine, get another job. But then I won't be able to see her very much." I said, "Your choice." So after another 4 months, he's got enough money to buy an engagement ring. I needed a magnifying glass to find the diamond, but it was an engagement ring. And he put it on layaway. And I am praying because she's a lovely girl, and I'm glad when people clean up their lives. But here's my personal dilemma. I honor that. I'll do anything to help you, but I don't want that as the parent of my grandchild. You know, life is hard enough without giving them cellular memory for addictive behaviors. So I'm praying, and I'm not saying anything. And one day he came home and he says, "Well, Mom, how do you feel now?" He says, "Are you okay with the fact that, you know, she's been clean now about 8 or 9 months?" And I said, "Well, having worked with a lot of heroin addicts, this is my concern. Supposing you marry her and you have a couple, 3 kids, and you're off at work, And one day something happens to stress her, and she relapses. Who's going to take care of the kids? Oh, he says, I'm sure that wouldn't happen, Mom. And I said, well, I would hope it wouldn't, but the relapse rate for heroin addiction is very, very high. And that's all I said. So fast forward about another 3 months, and he's almost ready to get this engagement ring out of, layaway. Comes home one night, sits down in the kitchen, obviously dejected. And I said, did you have a hard day? And I said, I didn't have a good day at all. I said, so what happened? Do you want to talk about it? I don't know. I said, well, if you want to talk about it, I'm ready to listen. If you don't, that's fine. You never push a male brain to talk, ever. They got to do it when they're ready. Boy, a lot of women don't know that. And they come to my office and they're complaining about each other. He won't talk. And when you ask him what's going on, he goes, well, she'll say something and she wants me to instantly respond. So I have to have a little session with her. It takes about 15 minutes for a human brain to come to a conclusion. The most effective way for that to occur in a female brain is if she just opens her mouth and starts talking. And in the process of talking, she'll come to a conclusion. And the problem will be if she's been shamed for doing that and doesn't do that, it'll really take a long time to come to a conclusion. The male brain is 100% opposite in general. The male brain processes most effectively, silently, and internally, and only wants to talk when his brain's already come to the conclusion. So, it'll go like this. Let's say he comes home from vacation, from work, and says, I just got my vacation days. We got the first week off in September. We got to figure out where to go. Now he shuts up. He's giving her the bottom line. And so she starts, oh, vacation, first week in September. That's excellent. Let's see. What do we do? Well, we could go to Disney World in Florida. And if we did that, we couldn't visit so-and-so. Okay, well, scratch Florida. Okay, we could do this. And she's jumping around from pillar to post, doing the pros and cons. And after about 7.5 minutes, she stops and she goes, you haven't said anything. Are you part of this conversation? Talk to me. Okay, his brain isn't done yet. And it's about the Tibet reel. And he goes, well, I kind of thought it might be fun to go to Tibet. Okay, that's not his conclusion. It's his halfway conclusion. She goes, Tibet? Are you nuts? Are you nuts? We're not going to Tibet. And they argue for 11 weeks about Tibet and never do go on vacation. Okay, so I just put that out there and let it go. And I'm praying. So after about 20 minutes or so, he says, well, here's the deal, Mom. She relapsed last night and she's in the hospital. I said, ooh, I'm really sorry. I really regret that happened. That must make you feel terrible. Yeah, he says it does. Mom, here's the problem. What if I married her and had 2 or 3 kids? And she relapsed, and who's going to take care of the kids? And I'm going, yes. He was listening. I'll tell you, it's difficult for those brains, and it's difficult for our brains watching them deal with it. And you need to be really, really careful, because depending on your child's brain, if you tell them to do something or not to do something, they may do the opposite just to prove to you they can. And we make lots of mistakes like that. So, bottom line, all of that aside, you decide what you'll do about sexual activity. You decide what sexual behaviors you're going to exhibit. You decide when you're going to do it, who you're going to do it with, and so on and so forth. And the only way I know of to do that responsibly is to think ahead and decide what are my standards? What are my boundaries? How do I avoid putting myself in situations where those might be hard to maintain? And fortunately, your brain is able to do that. So have fun with the information and stay out of trouble.